Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. For those that have been watching previously for 2025, and for anyone new to the channel, welcome. Welcome to Limitless VR and Sim Rigs. It's 2025. We've got a whole heap of awesome content lined up for the year, and I thought we'd actually kick the new year off with part 2 of the VPfroce Rhino force feedback joystick base that I'm running in the rig. Now, for those of you that already know of this base, you might be on the waiting list and you're hanging out to get it. This will be a great video to watch because it's going to be showing you part 2 of the force feedback that can be obtained from this base and what does that actually correlate to in the real world when you're hanging onto the stick. Now, for those of you that have not seen the previous video, part 1, I'll put a link up in the video here to that. That's a pretty in-depth deep dive into that base where we were testing with an extension the forces that you were going to feel in a couple of different airframes. We were flying in the ZLIN in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. We were also flying in the PC-21, which my friend, the Air Force mate, was flying as well the time he was over. Now, that was interesting because the forces he was feeling from that stick were maybe not as intense as he was hoping, although we knew it wouldn't be real. And we think that was actually down to the model itself. Now, if you haven't seen that video, that is a banger. I'll actually put a link to that video up in the description. I'll put it in the description and I'll put it in the video as well. That's a really good video, but we will be flying that as well today to test that and see what are the forces like with what I've done to the base. And then the third aircraft that we're flying was the F4 Phantom. And it's interesting because DCS is giving, I guess, native telemetry to the VPfroce Rhino, whereas Microsoft Flight Simulator has no native telemetry coming out of that game for the base. And that's where the magic really shines with this base because we're using a piece of software called telemetry force feedback, and that is augmenting the feedback that you can feel, and you can tune those parameters to your heart's content to get those aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, both 2020 and 2024, to feel as realistic as you want them to. I'm using some additional effects like touchdown effect so that when I land, I can feel the stick sort of yank forward in my hand. Now, real pilots will tell you that that's not realistic, but I'm not a real pilot, and in the sim rig, that additional level of immersion of the stick sort of notching forward as I land is just awesome. I've almost had the stick rip out of my hand on some landings, so for me, that's adding to the immersion, although for a real pilot or someone wanting to actually get study level sim, you'd turn that off. Cool features to have nonetheless. And speaking of cool features, today's sponsor for this video is Say Intentions AI. Now, if you are looking to increase immersion in the game and you're looking at things like force feedback joysticks and motion systems and butt kickers, look no further than Say Intentions AI. This software is epic. I use it every time I fly, and it works perfectly in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 and FS 2024. You are going to have a real experience of talking to ATC. It's incredible. I get handoff, I radio tower, they're radioing back, they're giving me which end of the runway I'm taking off from, what my coordinates are. It's just incredible. You're getting your squawk, you're getting everything. The communication is incredible, and the level of immersion that it brings to the game is just amazing. They've also got features within that software that if you are, I guess, a more experienced person flying in simulators, you can turn off the trainer wheels so that the ATC is going to be as close to real life as possible, and it's not going to be as forgiving. But for someone like me who's new to flight simming and the ATC, although I'm not new to flight simming, I've been doing it for ages, but I'm new to flight simming with an additional level of realism, I can leave those trainer wheels turned on, and then that software is a little bit more gentle. And I've even asked it dumb stuff, what frequency do I need to be on? And the ATC radios back and tells me the correct frequency. It is incredible. The VPfroce Rhino force feedback base. We're doing some different stuff today. What we've done different for part 2 of our test is we have 3D printed a second adapter, and I've actually raised the base up into the rig. I've had to change the position of the seat. I've had to do a fair bit because the purpose of this one here was so the base could stay low, the stick could actually come back into my seat as I'm not running a cutout for the stick. For those of you that are running a cutout, probably going to be able to get that base higher. I think the takeaway from today is going to be, if you want the most out of that force feedback base, you're going to want to get that as high as possible, as close to that point of connection where the joystick is connecting, so that you're getting the maximum amount of feedback. If you're putting a really long extension on the end of that base, all you're doing is diminishing the newton meters of force that you're going to feel. Now, what's interesting with this extension is that is actually 130 millimeters. And what does that equate to? That's 5 inches of extension. Now, what we've also done is printed for today's part 2 a smaller extension, and I've actually raised the base in the rig, readjusted the seat. I've done a whole heap of stuff to get it to work. And this extension is only 50 millimeters. And so we have reduced that down to just 2 inches. So we've gone from 5 inches down to 2 inches in reducing that leverage on that base. So what's that going to look like in the rig? Now, for those of you that have seen the previous video, you know I bought a newton meter gauge so that we could run these tests. And this little newton meter gauge has been amazing. It was 60 bucks off Amazon, and it's going to allow us to get a pretty damn accurate reading of newton meters, but more importantly, I think, in kilograms. And look, for all the Americans out there, what's that in pounds? Because I think for people that aren't engineers, or you don't have that kind of background, newton meters really means nothing to us. I get that it's a measurement of force, but I think let's correlate that into something that we can all relate to. And in the previous video, I related that to litres of milk. And approximately 1 litre is 1 kilo, of course, unless this was full of, I don't know, mercury. But 1 litre of milk is 1 kilogram. I'll put up on the screen what that is in pounds. So let's think about this. The force feedback base is capable of generating 5 kilograms of force, which is 9 newton meters. And so we're now at 2 kilos. We're now at 3 kilos, 4 kilos, and 5 kilos. Now that is getting pretty heavy on my arm. And if I was having to hold the stick in that position through a dive bomb or some type of G-force, pull or something like that, I mean, that is really uncomfortable. And I'm not going to be able to hang on to that for too much longer without that really, really starting to make my arm ache. So what is that going to look like in the rig? And then we also did the static test where we just fired up the software so that we could put the spring force at 100%. And then we actually did a static hold for, I think we did that for about a minute to see at what point do the fans kick in, what did that do to the forces that we were feeling, because some people are concerned about that diminishing the force feedback over time. You've got to remember, in flight, you are very rarely, if ever, going to be in a full hold with forces on that stick at 100% for anywhere longer than a couple of minutes if you're flying normal jets, normal planes. Unless you're flying really, really old warbirds, the old World War I sort of aircraft, that's where, because they didn't have trim and those other advanced features of flight, you might have pretty heavy forces on that stick. But for the most part, you're just not going to be exceeding that stuff. So we're going to do all these tests. We're going to put everything through its paces. We've got the net cam here so we can get a good reading on that gauge as we're going through our flight. Let's get into the video. This is going to be part 2 and the final part of this test for the VPfroce Rhino base. And I hope this helps shine a bit of light on what this base is capable of and whether or not it's the right purchase for your rig. Let's go. Right, we're at Wyndham. And we're just going to radio ATC for departure. So we'll get ramp on 119.99. I've just done a quick radio check to make sure we are all good. Frequency is tuned in, so we'll commit that to the radio and see if we can get any comms on the ramp channel. Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo, requesting runway for departure.
Ground to flight deck. Good evening, Peter. Use runway 36 for departure.
I mean, look at that. It knows who I am through the Say Intention software, and we've got runway 36 for departure. Copy that, Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo, runway 36 for departure. All right, let's get her started and let's get in the air, and then we're going to request permission if we can do some, I guess, some somewhat aerobatic manoeuvres to test out the VPfroce Rhino. This is the reality of using Say Intentions AI. You have just got such an epic level of immersion in game. Anyway, let's get her started and we'll get her in the air. Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo. We are ready for departure, runway 36.
Joystick, Hotel 13 Mike Bravo. Wyndham Airport info, runway 36, winds calm, clear for takeoff.
Copy that, Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo. We are departing, runway 36. All right, let's get some altitude and we'll start our test. So we are taxiing down.
Kit fix 3 Mike Bravo.
We're in the R.
36 departure acknowledged, winds calm, QNH 1007, safe flight.
Okay, we are in the air. Flaps up, we are full power. Now I'm sitting a bit further back in the seat than I normally would for this test. And also I've got the motion system turned off. I don't have the butt kickers on. I just want to be able to focus on getting the right amount of pull through the stick and not having anything else impacting what we could be feeling through the stick itself. So what we're going to do in heading north in the direction that we are from runway 36, I'm about to radio Wyndham Tower and let's see what they tell us in regards to wanting to do some, I guess, some aerobatic testing of the control surfaces. So let's see what they say. Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo. We might get the gauge on as well.
Kit fix 3 Mike Bravo, experimental 3 Mike Bravo, go ahead.
Copy that, Wyndham Tower, 3 Mike Bravo. We are requesting permission to do some low-level flying and testing of the flight control surfaces. All right, we'll switch that to kilograms.
Kit fix 3 Mike Bravo, experimental 3 Mike Bravo, low-level flying and flight control testing approved. Maintain VFR and remain clear of controlled airspace. Report back when testing is complete.
Copy that, Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo. We will stay VFR and we will radio back once our flight surfaces testing is complete. My goodness, look at that. I mean, does it get any cooler? Oh, I love it. All right, so what we're going to do, we are going to go full trim, nose down, and then we're going to be using the gauge to see if we can get a reading on what's happening. So here we go, full trim, nose down, and we are pulling back on the stick now, and let's see what forces are required for us to be able to maintain level flight. Okay, we're trimming it further. Okay, so we are at full trim. Just trying to get it to level. Trying to get it to level out here. And wow, we are sort of modulating around the 3.2. In order to just try and stabilize. Wow. So yeah, we're really modulating between, I'd say, 3.2 and if I start to pull back there so that we don't, yeah, we're really starting to nosedive there. There you go. I think you're getting a pretty good reading. We're sitting around sort of the 3.2 in order for us to try and keep at level flight with full trim down. So there we go. That is pretty impressive. In the first video test, I'll just regain control there. In the first video test, we were pretty much sitting at about, gosh, I say in the video shy of 3, but it was actually, looking at the gauge, about 3.5. So we've managed to net 800 grams of force just by reducing that extension from the 130, 120 down to the 50. So that's impressive. That's almost a kilogram of pulling force that we have increased by simply changing that lever on the base. Absolutely awesome. So we'll get her up to altitude now, and then we're going to go for a dive. But what we're going to do in this dive is obviously have it fully trimmed, nose down, go into a dive and see what the forces are for us to pull out of that. So let's get her up to probably about, I don't know, we'll go to 3,000, and then we'll trim nose down, go in for a dive, and then put the gauge on and see what force is required for us to pull back from that dive. Okay, so we're almost at 3,000 now. We'll start leveling out. And here we go. We're going to go full nose trim. All right, here we go. We're going for a full dive bomb now. So 3 kilos, and we'll go again. Pick up some serious airspeed. And there we go. So pretty much the same. 3.2 kilos is what we're feeling, even doing a dive there. Now let's trim her out and see what kind of forces we're feeling if we go for a roll and then we'll pull back on the stick. Okay, so we've got a fair bit of airspeed happening there. And so let's now go into a roll and then a pull back on the stick. So about 2.6. Nearly 3 kilos of force there. Banking it right over now. All right, and we'll back her off. So anywhere sort of between 2 and 3 kilos of stick force for the roll and sort of a G pull. I don't know what you'd call it really. We didn't actually test that in the previous video, but I thought that would be a worthy test in this as well. So some pretty significant stick forces that we're feeling through the stick with the decrease of the extension. Now we're going to swap airframes and jump into the PC-21, but before we do, we better just radio ATC and let them know that we've finished our testing. Wyndham Tower, experimental 3 Mike Bravo. We have concluded our control flight surface testing.
Kit fix 3 Mike Bravo. Control flight surface testing concluded. Maintain VFR. Safe flying.
Doesn't get any better than that. So flaps up. And check this out for a really cool effect. Okay, landing gear is up. And watch the stick. There's the clunk. Okay. And you can actually feel through the stick like the hydraulics or the motors whirring as it's lifting the landing gear up into the undercarriage. It's really cool. Now, one of the things that's the shame, we don't feel like this particular airframe is modelled as well as some of the others. My RAAF Air Force friend Andrew, he is actually a flight instructor, chief flying instructor for the PC-21s, and yeah, he just didn't feel we didn't feel like we were getting the most out of the VPfroce that we could have, and we think that was to do with this model. Now, you can tweak the settings in the telemetry force feedback to give you more, but for the purposes of this testing, we'll run the tests exactly the same as previously. So we're flying level and we are going to trim the nose all the way down and then start pulling back on the stick to see how much is required for us to stop this from wanting to go nose forward. So we can sort of see there, it's really not a lot. Not a lot of force at all. So I think we've got an issue with this actual airframe. It just doesn't feel like it's giving us what we want out of the game to the telemetry force feedback. Now we'll go for a roll and then a pull back on the stick. A bit more. So what are we dealing with there? So sort of 2.5. Yeah, 2.5 kilograms of force. I'm just off the bump stop there. So when we go into a roll and then a high G turn like this, we're getting some reasonable force through the stick, but level flight, trimmed out, yeah, it's just not giving us as much, which is a real shame, and that is honestly no fault of the VPfroce Rhino. That is just the airframe that we're flying in, and you can see there we're about 1.3 kilos to maintain level flight, trimmed nose all the way down. So let's take her up and we'll go for a dive. Here we go. We're going to nose trim all the way down and we're going to be really aggressive here. We're going for a serious dive. Okay, we're going to get that on there. All right, we're starting to pull back. And yeah, sort of 3 kilos of force. We'll go for a, let's go for a full roll. We're holding at about 2.4. It started to, and you can see there as we're starting to stall, look at that. Look at the force washing off. Okay, we're stalling right out there. And so we'll let her just naturally do what she wants. Remember, we are trimmed fully nose down. And there we are, look at that. We're starting to pick up airspeed now and I have not moved my hands. We're getting almost 3 kilos on the stick there. We're going to make it all the way around this time without a stall. And we've maintained a solid sort of 2 kilos through that. Oh, looks like we're going to stall her out again. So we'll let it go so you can actually see what's happening on the stick there. And look at that. We're just completely losing all of that force. It's dropping right off as we pretty much stall. Gosh, we're down to, oh, that's gone completely lifeless. Look at that, 0. Okay, and we are starting to fly again. Oh man, that is substantial. Wow. Woohoo! That's really cool. All right, we'll level her out. That is really cool. So hopefully that's helped demonstrate, certainly for Microsoft Flight Simulator, the forces that you are going to feel through the stick and demonstrated the importance of doing what you can to lower the stick to the base to get as much force feedback out of the stick as possible. Unfortunately, the F4 Phantom is not playing nicely. I don't know what's going on. I just cannot get the force feedback to work properly. I've restarted the telemetry force feedback, I've restarted the computer, I've restarted everything. Short of me uninstalling DCS and going through a few other things I know to do, I do have an issue with it. Now, for the purpose of this video, this is not an exact science, this is more me showing you what's capable and the forces that you can be, I guess, expecting through the VPfroce Rhino force feedback base. And I do also happen to have the F-14. Now, out of the two aircraft in DCS that are some of the most incredible to fly with the force feedback, these are the two. So I thought, let's jump in the F-14, and we'll be doing more videos soon with the F-14. And what better way to test the force feedback than going for a high G turn. Now I've had to turn the G experience off in this because I keep blacking out. So we're full afterburner, and we are going to bank her over, and let's now start putting her through a pretty significant G turn and have a look at the forces that you can experience through this base. Okay, here we go, and we're also now going to go down for a dive. And now pulling back.
We have a
We are pretty close to the ground, and we are going to go for a full roll.
12 miles.
Speed, we'll go for another. Oh, and look at that, we're going to stall it at that point there, and you probably saw the forces in kilograms drop off. Yeah, and we're really starting to lose flight now, so we'll start to level out. And look at that shuddering because of the forces over the airframe. Okay, so we'll just trim her out a little bit there. All right, we'll pick up some airspeed, and then we are going to go for a high speed turn. We've got our wings swept. Okay, how are we going for airspeed there? Okay, we are going full thrust, full afterburner. 700 knots, 800 knots. Okay, here we go. So we've got reasonable airspeed, and we are now going for a high G turn. Trying to keep that as best I can. Oh, it just wants to pull it out of your hand. Whew. Okay, now we're going to get up to some altitude, and we'll go for a real heavy dive bomb, full trim, nose down, and we'll see what forces we can be feeling through the stick. It is just beautiful in DCS this time of the day. We're at the Nevada test range, and it is just awesome. The lighting on the clouds, man, it is wild.
Traffic.
Right, we are at a reasonable altitude there, so we'll just start to level her out here. Okay, and we're going to trim nose all the way forward. All right, here goes. Okay, we're going in for a dive. Ooh-wee. We are doing some serious airspeed. We'll go for a full roll. You can see the forces that I'm having to hold on that stick. And then we'll level out there. Rotate. Oh. Probably need to back off the afterburner a bit there. And we'll go the other way, and we'll go for a high speed turn. All right, so now we're going to jump into the VPForce configurator, where we can actually put the stick into its full spring force, and we're going to test what kind of forces we can be experiencing through the stick. For that, this is the software. So this is pretty much the VPForce configurator. This is where you can come in and you can tune all sorts of effects and various bits and pieces. I've got other videos on some of this stuff here, but there's a wealth of knowledge on the Discord for the VPfroce Rhino. It is worth getting on there. Any questions, that's the place to have those answers. But if we have a look at our settings here, I've got the master gain at 100. I've got the spring at 100. And there's actually a little dial. And I'll just move the stick out of the way here. Actually, we'll turn the dial down. That little dial there is also what allows you on the fly to control the spring force of the base to let that stick recenter if you've got that function turned on. And that is going to give us the full force of this stick so that we can test the pulling force of it. Now we can see here the y-axis, which is the one we've been pulling on, is sitting at 45 degrees, so the fans are running to cool that down. And I thought it might be best if we run it at its temperature of around that 40 degree mark, because that's probably where it's going to be while we're flying with the aircon on, so that we can actually test what that force is going to be when we pull. We've got the spring gain all the way up. We've got the dial all the way up. Everything's ready to go. So we're going to get our gauge on here now, and we are going to go for a 1 minute pull. So let's have a quick look here. And 3, 2, 1, let's go. So we are just off the bump stop there. Temperature's at 59. And so it would appear, I'm trying to hold that as steady as I can. It's not an exact science. And that's a minute. So I think what we can see from that, temperature's at 60 degrees. I'm holding that as best I can. Apart from me rigging up an apparatus and something to lock it in position, we're probably talking, a few grams left or right. I think what we can see there is on initial pull, we were at about 3.5 kilos. And then once that temperature started to spike, fans kicked in, it started to just progressively drop down. But we sat pretty steady at 2.6 kilos of force, pulling force that is, and it seemed to sit there. And I feel like it would sit there, it would stay there, because those fans were keeping that at about that 60 degree mark. So that's pretty good. 2.6 kilos of weight under your hand the whole time, as I showed with the milk at the beginning. That's a lot. That's a lot of weight that you're having to hang on to with that force. So it'll be interesting to see what we had in the first slot of test results in the first video I did. Right, temperature is starting to stabilize. Once we drop down to 44, the fans should kick off. And what I've done is actually moved this ring down approximately 50, which should be roughly where your pull point will be if you did not have this 50mm extension that I'm running. So your stick is directly on top of the base, giving you the maximum obtainable force from the VPfroce Rhino force feedback base. Before we were pulling from this point here, we're now pulling from this point here. And in the first lot of tests in the VPfroce Rhino video, it was actually pulling from here. So pretty interesting gauge of force that we're going to see. So we're at 44 degrees. Right, let's get ready for this. And again, we'll go for roughly a minute. So we'll have a quick look on the watch. We're at the 30-second mark. We'll go now. We are just shy of 5 kilos there. On the bump stop? No. Okay, there's the bump stop. We're just backing off. We're at 4.5. Hands have kicked in, trying to hold it steady. 4.3. $56 degrees. Just shy of 4, or just, I should say, just over 4. 56, it's holding it good. It's climbed to 57. We're almost at a minute. There you go, we're at about a minute there. Just going to back off. Whew! So 58 degrees, give or take. That was really cool. That was holding at let's call it 4.1 kilos for that minute test at that point there, which is the point at where a stick mounted directly on top of the VPForce is going to be pulling from without any extension. So that is pretty damn good. On initial pull, we had 5 kilos of force. And if I give it another pull now, even though the fans are running at 53 degrees, yeah, we're at 4.6 again, 4.5, back off. And this is how you're going to be flying. If you're feeling those forces when you're dogfighting, you're going to be oscillating, pulling, releasing, pulling, releasing. So temperatures drop. Let's pull again. Yeah, we're getting 4.5, 4.6, and we'll release. And then we'll pull again. And we're getting much the same. So if you were oscillating on that stick and rolling and pitching and dive bombing, you're going to be feeling some pretty significant forces through that stick if that's what the airframe is telling the stick you should be feeling and the G-forces that you're experiencing. So now the last test, we're actually going to pull the stick off the base and we're going to test the forces and see what we're feeling directly from the base itself. Okay, here we go. Last pull test. We're at 44 degrees and I've put the Velcro around the very top of the base here, remove the stick, and we're going to connect our little hook. And let's see what we get. Here we go. We'll go on the minute. And we'll go now. So look at that, with no stick, we're at, man, this is hard to hold. 6.2, 6.1, we're off the bump stop. Oh, not quite. There you go, we're off the bump stop there. 6.4. Oh, 6.3. Temperature at 59. We on the bump stop? Yeah, that's off the bump stop there. So, yeah, she's dropped to 5. 61. And release. That's a minute. There you go. So, wow, pulls well over 5 kilos without any grip on it. Of course, you're not going to be operating it from there. There are some mods I've seen, though, to actually reduce the height of that. So if you're building one yourself and you want to reduce the height, again, you're going to get more pull force. But I'm pretty damn happy with what I've achieved. Lowering it, going the 50mm extension, that's working for me. And that is pretty good. Don't forget, like and subscribe, share these videos with all your friends. I hope you enjoyed it. That's part 2. It's not an exact science. I've done the best I can so that we can get the best results out of what we've got. I hope that's helped you understand the forces that you can be feeling from that base and the importance of trying to get it as close as you can to that leverage point so that you're getting the maximum force out of the base. I'll see you in the next video.